Always scares me. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's monthly webinar. Just to introduce us a little bit, we are Wellness Within Therapy and Counseling Services. And the reason we kind of started doing these webinars is because there is so much information out there that is readily available to us, but we wanted to make sure that we were providing some reliable information for us to be able to share with the public and a way for us to kind of engage more with the community as well. So that is why kind of Kyla started doing these a couple years ago, and we try to do them on a monthly basis. So Caitlyn, I'll just get you to kind of skip forward for me. So we are a team of compassionate mental health therapists dedicated to providing mental health and wellness services. We work with individuals, we work with couples, we work with families, promoting overall well-being and empowering people to lead their fulfilling lives. Okay, and I kind of already explained why we do the monthly webinar, so I'll get you to skip ahead there again, Caitlyn. So this is just a little brief introduction to our team. So we have Kyla, who is the clinic owner, and then we have, I'm not going to go over all the names because there's a slew of us here, but I think there's 10 or 11 of us. So you can, skip ahead to the next one. A mix of registered psychotherapists, social workers. We have a nurse psychotherapist. We have, who is fairly new to our team, a Reiki practitioner. And then also you'll see there, we have Caitlyn, who is our art therapy student, who is going to be running our webinar today. Right, so I'm going to hand it over to Caitlyn. And looking forward to it. Go ahead, Caitlyn. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Kelsey. As you said, my name is Caitlyn. I'm an art therapy student training at Kootenai Art Therapy Institute. And today I'm just going to share a little bit about art therapy. So our agenda for today, I'm going to cover some common misconceptions about art and art therapy. What is art therapy? What makes art therapy unique and effective? A bit about the brain, the body, and our self-perception that's related to art, as well as what it can support, and some licensure in Ontario and Canada, and followed by a Q&A period. So if you can just leave your questions to the end, that would be great. Okay, so before we start, I'm going to do a little invitation for self-reflection. So I want to ask, when you think about art or art therapy, what comes to mind? So you can take a moment and just sit and think about this. You can also write it down, just that immediate response. And you can also welcome to put it in the chat if you'd like. Okay. And these things can just kind of be something that we can just reflect on and be curious about as we move forward. Some things that might come up was like what art should be, or art therapy should be, judgments, expectations, kind of preconceived notions. And hopefully that will get a bit more clear as we move forward. So some common misconceptions that I hear a lot about art therapy and even art in general is that I am not an artist, I'm not creative. Maybe some people think art therapy is only for children, and that they don't know how to use art materials so that they can't participate. Often people think that what they do in art therapy is something that they can put up in their home, which they can, and it might be something that you want to put up, but it might not as well. You might want to keep that more personal. And that art therapy is just a time to kind of play with materials, arts and crafts kind of time. So art therapy is not focused on technique or artistic ability. Actually, anyone can do art therapy. It's not about creating something that's beautiful or aesthetically pleasing. It's not just for children or for kind of trauma support. And it's not about enhancing artistic skills, even though with practice you can enhance your artistic skills. And it's not interpreted or critiqued by the art therapist. So there's not going to be any judgment or telling the person what they've created or what it means. It's all that's kind of client-led. So what is art therapy? Art therapy is a form of psychotherapy that challenges like the person's challenges through creative the process and is trained by professionally trained art therapists. And while all forms of art can be used in art therapy, like dance, music, poetry, that kind of sort of thing, we're talking about visual art in this context. Um, Art therapy can integrate dialogue and art exploration, so you're not just making art the whole time and have that as the form of therapy. There is a dialogue with the art therapist, and it can support a range of cognitive and emotional challenges. It's relational, embodied, and it's suitable for all ages. We'll go over that a little more later in the slides. So, what makes art therapy unique? There is a mind-body connection aspect, helps with stress reduction and emotional regulation. It supports creativity and abstract thinking. It can make conscious, some unconscious material. So, meaning like it might bring up kind of suppressed memories or thoughts that you kind of didn't expect in the present moment. It's a self-reflective and self-expressive, so it can kind of give voice to some feelings and kind of slow down as well so you can reflect on your experiences. And there's also aspect of like symbolism and metaphor that can arise. So you kind of have associations with certain symbols or metaphor that's actually individual as well as collective. Um, so why art therapy is effective? Um, so your beliefs and thoughts and behaviors can emerge through the creative experience. And it can be experiential and empowering because you can actually like make choices, changes to your art. And then it can lead to development of like flexibility and adaptability because sometimes things don't always turn out the way you'd expect or you would like them to in art. So kind of that process can kind of mirror other experiences in your life or kind of being that metaphor. Um, and this can also promote flexibility and adaptability in the moment. So your present moment experience processing of the here and now. Um, and it also helps you get in a state of mindfulness and flow. Often there's a sense of focus, attention. Um, it's a sensory experience, so you might notice sounds, smells, textures, and that kind of thing can also enhance the present moment. And it's integrative with other modalities, for example, other types of therapy, but it's also integrative of like profound life experiences. So the creative process. So, like I said, kind of patterns and beliefs can emerge through the art making and also kind of seeing the final product. When it's already finished, you might notice other things, as well as the processing with the art therapist. So the art therapist can ask you questions and you can go a little bit deeper. Also, all of those can kind of bring insights and change. Art therapy can help express the indescribable. So something that you can't quite find words for how you're feeling or an experience. Um, and and it can externalize challenges. So bringing fresh perspective. So something that's internal, you can then create externally in a different like creative way that can kind of spark something new within. And polarities of experience, what I mean by that is so in a session, you might have a range of emotions, a range of experiences where it might feel playful, might feel fun, sense of awe, kind of like connecting to deep values or memories. And then it can also be frustrating, challenging, and so kind of having that full range in one experience. So there's individual and there's group art therapy. Depending on the art therapist's training and their kind of therapeutic approach, they can approach these differently, but I will speak to how I was trained and how I work as an art therapist individually and in a group. So this is a general overview kind of thing. So both individual and group art therapy can offer insights and promote change. But what differentiates them is the structure of the sessions and the processing of the art and like the depth of personal histories um, of the client. So while those personal histories can come up in the group container, in individual therapy, it can just go a little bit deeper. Um, and then in individual art therapy, there can be invitations and materials that can be catered to the individual. So, for example, they might have certain materials that they prefer to work with, and so you can choose to work with certain materials that they enjoy and that will help them achieve their goal or their exploration. And also, there could be materials chosen to promote the change that you're hoping to achieve or to help them move through an experience. For example, if someone came in to a session very angry, or this that strong kind of emotion, to help them move through it, like you could choose clay, for example, where you could like actually add like the pressure. Um, or an action of like throwing or large body movements. Um, so it's actually like bringing in the body as well. Um, and excuse me, with group art therapy, it can follow a structure. There can be a group coming together of shared goals or shared themes. Um, there's kind of optional sharing as well, but typically the art therapist isn't asking more questions for them to further the exploration. It's just kind of like reflecting back and supporting and kind of setting the group norms and support for that. Um, there is still reflective time, so there can be kind of still those personal insights and stuff like that learned. And then there is also the opportunity for peer learning and support. Um, so there's kind of relationships building through the group and through shared lived experiences. Okay. So I wanted to include this little quote and a little bit of reflection on it. So it is from an artist, but there is like that correlation between art and therapy. It's kind of an interesting connection where art therapy is its own thing, but then it still does connect to art and therapy. And I thought this quote kind of touched upon both. So, art is our true global language. It speaks to our need to reveal, heal, and transform. It transcends our ordinary daily lives and lets us imagine what is possible. So, I do believe that. And I have like, there are a few like caveats, I think, to it. So, it's funny in art school, when I went to art school, there was often talk about art as a universal language. And in one side, I agree to that. And then the other part of that is that art is like as unique as the person creating it and it's subjective. It can be interpreted in a variety of ways. So if you go to, say, an art gallery, you could look at the same painting and a bunch of people would have different interpretations of it or different perspective about what that meant for them. And they might have different responses to it. So it could be really touching for one person and another person it might not speak to them at all. Um, so art therapy is client-led. It honors the unique perspective of the individual. So their perspective and their interpretation of the art is what's most important, while the art therapist could kind of bring in some kind of links of like what they're noticing, what the person's reflecting on or patterns, that kind of thing. it's still the meaning is evolved through the client. And then often if you offer the same kind of invitation for clients to explore, again, it can elicit many different results, um, kind of visually. So I find that also extremely interesting. Okay. So the other piece about that I want to touch on is the human art connection. So in the sense that memories and dreams and thoughts are stored as images in our psyche, and that memories can even be constructed through images. So there's some research around like um, that when you see a photograph, for example, of your childhood or something, and there might be some emotion that you have around it, but it also could be, stories that you were told and stuff like that. And then so you're kind of building a narrative around that. And then um, artistic creation and expression is an element of communication. Oh, sorry, jump slides here. Oh, no. No, I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. My mouse just kind of went haywire for a second. Um, this element of communication and culture and entertainment. So, as we all know, that it can be art can be used as like activism. It's also inherent in our culture and entertainment media. And another aspect of art that I think is interesting is that it's kind of inherent in childhood. Um, and so often, like babies or children, before they're even walking, sometimes they're like dancing in their seat or like moving to rhythm. They're able to create art. So I just find that extremely interesting that there's that correlation, even like pre-verbal, that they're kind of drawn to art as a form of expression. Okay. There's also neurological and physiological benefits of art and art therapy. And there's also, like in the research, and these things are all intersecting. So um, there's a stress reduction element where it's lowering cortisol and blood pressure, increasing dopamine, strengthening brain connectivity between the hemispheres, enhancing neuroplasticity. Um, it can support emotional regulation, as well as nervous system regulation and the sensory motor pathways. So it's considered kind of a bottom-up therapy, as some people refer to it, instead of top-down. So instead of like mentalizing um, or conceptualizing that kind of sort of thing, it's kind of through the body and it incorporates the body and incorporates like nervous system and the motor cortex, sensory processing, and the felt sense. So it can kind of help you attune to your feelings and sensations, emotions, and can kind of give you more feedback that way. Okay, so this is just like an interesting thing, the idea of creativity. It's a huge topic, and I just want to quickly touch on something that the Daisy Fancourt, she wrote a recent book called The Art Cure, The Science of How Art Saves Lives. Um, there's also a great book called This Is Your Brain on Art. But yeah, she's a professor of psychobiology and epidemiology, and she talks about creativity as the forgotten fifth pillar of health with diet, sleep, exercise, and nature. Okay, so back to art therapy. Um, so art therapy can help you really deepen and develop a better understanding of yourself, which can lead to self-compassion, self-trust, a kind of deepening and reconnection of your strengths and your values. Um, and it can help with like transforming your belief systems, stress management, as I mentioned, as well as other common therapeutic modalities like helping with relationships or boundaries, grief, problem solving, life transitions and difficult experiences, and supporting children and youth. So accreditation in Ontario and Canada. So there's a Canadian Art Therapy Association. There's also Ontario Expressive Arts Therapy Association, but this one's the standard across Canada. Um, so it's professional credential. There's a you require a graduate level diploma or master's degree. They set the standards for training in ethical practice, which is similar to other art therapy associations in the United States and Britain. And Canadian art therapists have the ability to support clients across Canada. And then some therapy programs are recognized by provincial licensing bodies like the CRPO. So there's potential to have dual licensure with as a registered psychotherapist and registered Canadian art therapist. Yeah. And thank you so much for listening. And does anyone have any questions? You can also put it in the chat.
Um, I do have a couple questions, Caitlin, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. Do you want me
Uh,
to keep sharing?
my first question is this something that is offered virtually
Oh,
or
yes.
yeah?
Yeah, it can be offered virtually or in person.
Okay.
Um, and that's a really interesting question because there's different elements of them too. Because in person, you have someone physically there seeing what you're creating.
Hmm.
And they can also like work inside alongside you, so there can be a co-regulation kind of element to it.
Right.
Um, Definitely depending on the age. Like children, I would encourage to see in person. Um, but adults and everything can do it virtually.
Mhm.
Sometimes the virtual environment can add an element of safety, and can kind of feel a little less nervous potentially to create because the person doesn't always see. Like you can move your screen so that they can see what you're creating, but people don't always feel comfortable with that. But
Mhm.
then it kind of gives them the opportunity if they would like to share, they can do that. And it also gives them access to their own materials, things like, the comforts of their own home. Um, and then in person, there's potential to have access to materials that you might not have at home.
Mhm.
And if you're in a group, to see what other people are creating, to kind of have that sensory aspect of as well, of being in a group or being with another person. So yeah, there's a kind of benefits of both.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And my other question is if you were to do this individually, and I'm assuming that well, I'll just ask the question. Is it something that someone would do like on a weekly or biweekly basis and kind of like always returning to the art therapy? Or is it more kind of like a drop in and kind of like a one off? And I'm assuming it's kind of like both options. I know since you've been here and you've been offering a lot of like group therapies where it's kind of been more of that like drop in kind of a format. So yeah, I'm kind of curious about how it would look for somebody who is seeking it out individually and wanting it on a more like regular basis. Is that sort of something that is offered and is a very normal regular thing?
Yeah, it definitely is offered and it definitely is a regular thing. Art therapy would involve art making each session, but it doesn't take up the whole session, like I said, so there would be elements of it, and it is powerful to do it over a period of time in a
Mhm.
group and an individual because it just deepens the experience. Like you just get way more out of the experience than just that one-off session.
Right.
And also you kind of, build relationship, get more comfortable with making art and expressing in that way. So I actually encourage people to sign up for series or for multiple individual sessions. Um, the kind of cadence and the amount of sessions would depend on the
Mhm.
individual and what they're
Mhm.
seeking support with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that it would each time you would do it, it would get, yeah, so much more deeper and you would be building on kind of the discoveries that you had or the processing that you had in a previous session. So that would be neat.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing about that is that the interesting thing is sometimes there can be similar imagery or like patterns in the art when you look at them all together, and that can be an interesting way when you're closing with a client to kind of look back on what has changed and their growth. And yeah, it's really interesting. Even myself, I'm like, oh, I noticed like this thing is coming up again, this particular kind of pattern in the art or imagery or like, yeah. So it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting in that way.
Yeah, that would be really cool. No, I want to do it. That would be really neat. And I love it too, because as you were talking about it, there's just so many similarities to EMDR, I feel that I love, like, like taxing that working memory and kind of I think in the similar way with that bilateral stimulation in the EMDR. But one thing that I do really like, and I'm assuming kind of about the art therapy too, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that kind of similar to EMDR is that, say we're doing trauma processing or something where they don't have to say what the things are that are coming to them. Or I imagine with art therapy, it's the same. It's like you can sort of explain or kind of talk about what's coming up for you, but you absolutely don't have to. Is that right in saying that?
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, I love that you brought up the bilateral simulation because there are certain even exercises that you can do that involve that as well. And
Yeah.
even like the eye movements in the eyes and everything. And there can be so much that can come up for somebody through the art making experience. And like sometimes they don't feel comfortable sharing, and that's definitely not necessary. And sometimes even that is like helpful in itself, like
Yeah.
just creating it and seeing it. Um, and yeah, it's very relational. Like it's what that person's comfortable with sharing at that time.
Right.
And yeah, what type of expression is needed. It's nice in that way, in the sense that it doesn't require all those like words and
Right.
explaining and kind of
Yeah.
conceptualizing and breaking it down in the moment. It can it can last over time. It can integrate into your life. Like
Yeah.
even keeping the art around and reflecting on it later, other
Mhm.
things can emerge. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I do love that. And I think it is a kind of important thing to highlight because I think it's just still quite a common misconception, right? Where, especially with trauma work, that we have to talk about it, where you absolutely do not have to talk about it to still be able to process and reprocess that. So I think that that is really cool. And I like to highlight that as such an advantage of the art therapy as well for people that don't necessarily want to you know, dive into all those details and feel like they need to be able to get something out of it. You know what I'm saying? So I
Exactly.
just think that's really cool.
Hmm.
So those are all my questions, I
I
think.
have a couple if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I appreciate what you were saying about creativity and how it's considered the missing fifth pillar. So how would you approach working with a client who's maybe struggling with the element of creativity or beginning the process of making art?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I love that question because it often happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's resistance, there's fears that come up. Um, I think I forgot to mention that at the age of 9, about the age of 9, children start to kind of try to create like realistic art, like generally. And also at that age, like there's a lot of influences that lead to your perception around if you're an artist or if you're um, capable of creating or if your capacity, whatever, of creating art. And that gets internalized, and people will stop creating art sometimes around that age. Generally, it can be earlier, it can be later, but and then they have this identity or this like belief that I can't do that. So sometimes there's that barrier. That's one aspect. But I would also be really curious about how it's presenting in the specific client because and what we're working on. So for example, somebody feels really stuck, doesn't even know what to do. Um, I would have them like look at the materials and maybe consider what's standing out for them. Like just not even overly thinking about it, just kind of like what you like. So say if we're doing collage, for example, just go look at the materials, notice what colors, what textures, what images are standing out, take those, and you can start working with that. And also, sometimes there's a barrier just to start. Like there's a kind of that blank canvas, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to
Hmm.
create. Or sometimes it feels so big. Like if you're trying to represent something that can feel so huge in one image, just has to be right now. Like it just has to be right in this moment, you know? Like sometimes reminding of them, if it doesn't have to be everything, it can literally just be starting. And it doesn't even have to like, you don't have to have the idea ahead of time. And even just like making marks can be helpful. Um, and just that starting can sometimes lead to something else or sometimes lead to the next step. And then also like just saying that is helpful too. Like, oh, like, yeah, I don't have to have everything together. Like, I don't have to have all the answers right now. I just need the next step, like that kind of thing. And sometimes I find that there's like, yeah, I can notice patterns right away in their first attempts at making the art, like certain things like perfectionism or like, yeah, like taking up space, using like materials and yeah, it's really fascinating actually, but that's definitely something that comes up a lot. And that I think it's kind of the narrative. Um so yeah, just starting and then sometimes that will unfold. Like sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I don't know what to do," or like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
I
And then we can
agree
talk
with your
about
point. I
that.
think a lot of us do self-label as I'm creative or I'm artistic or I'm not creative. So I can see how that might be a barrier for some people who might really benefit from art therapy.
Yeah,
Um,
and the creativity in general is always like fascinating to me because it's like everyone's creative. Like everyone can
mhm.
make something, everyone can make dinner, everyone you know, decorates their home in a certain way, wears clothes in a certain way. Like we all have the ability to be creative and we've just been told that we can't.
Yeah.
Or we believe that we can for different reasons. So, and also, it's also kind of like the muscle, some people call like creative muscle, like where you kind of have to use it and like explore it. And I think there's kind of like a remembering of like, oh yeah, like if you haven't, for example, like used a paintbrush since you were 5 years old, like there's a kind of remembering and a re-exploring of that thing. So
Hmm.
I think, yeah, it's by making it not too precious and just like going with the process, really.
Totally, yeah.
Hmm.
My other question was, I found it interesting how you were saying that art therapy can be particularly beneficial for working with stress management, and emotional regulation. So I guess I was wondering, in your personal opinion, like what makes art therapy so effective for stress management and regulating your emotions?
I think from, I think it comes down to like the present, being in the present moment, um, and also that body connection. So like actually moving the body and coming into the present awareness of like how paint moves on a page or like that mark is bringing them into like, you know, what's happening now instead of like stress about the future or what happening in the past kind of things, kind of bringing in the present. And then there's also that like physiological nervous system that's kind of just happening like and with the brain and everything too. Um, so I think that's the reason why. Um, and the other thing is sometimes I think there's a lot of with stress, there can be a lot of like overthinking,
Yeah.
and like and kind of at a certain fast pace potentially, and like just slowing it down and like creating something and kind of having a little bit of there can be almost like a sense of wonder and awe, which can also help like calm down some of that. some of that stress or some of that preoccupation with like other things and almost brings in something else. I almost always feel a little bit nervous to say this, but like there's a spiritual element for me in art therapy where it's like sometimes it feels like, my higher self is like coming through. Um, and that can be really like reassuring as well. Um, yeah, that's what I think.
Well, thank you. That was a great
Yeah,
answer.
thank you.
Those are all the questions that I have. Thank you for answering them.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for your questions. Great questions.
Okay, great. So maybe Caitlin, I'll get you to just hop to the next slide quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, so please reach out to us at Wellness Within if you're wanting to get booked in for a consult or for a session. Caitlin is going to be with us for the next little bit, offering some art therapy sessions, which is wonderful. And again, we always have our monthly wellness webinar series. Every month, typically around the third week of every month. And we also always have ongoing workshops and group events, and they're always on our calendar on our website. So please check that out. So yeah, thank you again, Caitlin. That was great. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.